on our YouTube channel if you ever want to go back to there as well. But with that being said, we will just jump right into it. Thank you to everyone coming to us from Eventbrite. We are Ama La Vida. We are a life, health and wellness, leadership, and career coaching company. And my name is Justice. I am a relationship strategist here on the team. And what that means is I'm one of the people that you speak with when you initially make contact. And you and I will have a half-hour conversation where I'll try to understand your current situation and your needs and what you really hope to get out of a relationship with the coach. And then I'm going to pair you up with someone on our team that I feel is most appropriately suited to help you accomplish those goals. And then from there on out, you start your engagement with your coach. And so if anybody has anything front of mind they want to talk about or, get the ball rolling, our calendars are first come, first serve. So I'm going to go ahead and drop my consult link right there if you want to schedule a conversation. Keep in mind, anybody that does come to us from a webinar event, you get your first session free. So something to consider as you consider coaching as a resource. But with that being said, today we have Coach David with us here, and he is going to take it over. So David, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Justice. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. And thank you for joining the Ama La Vida team. I love Ama La Vida. It's been a great opportunity to provide one-on-one coaching. We also provide coaching for businesses, and it really is about loving your life. So our coaching covers a wide variety of topics. If you'd like to learn more, please reach out to Justice, or you could reach out to myself as well. And I invite you to check out our website. It has a lot of really good information on it. Who am I? I'm actually Coach David, as we like to we go by Coach here. I have just out of curiosity in coaching. How many people have actually had a coach before? You could just pop it in the chat. Thank you, Christy. Excellent. Couple are popping in. Never. We might have to change that. Couple are coming in. I'm a certified executive coach. I actually have 20 years experience in human resources. So I've experienced in a wide range of topics. In additional in human resources, I certainly was an internal coach before becoming an executive coach. You can check out my LinkedIn if you'd like. There'll be more information as we share the slide deck to everyone. I'm actually a leadership coach here and a career coach at Ama La Vida. So as a leadership coach, I like to specialize in those parts of the organization where employees are trying to rise up in leadership or want to improve their leadership, or as part of our business to business, where we are looking at trying to help organizations be successful. In addition, due to my HR experience, I also am a career coach. So helping everybody from, I want to change professions, to how can I move up in my career? So wide variety of topics, and I'm glad to present today on hearing messages from the top and really understanding. So Justice already checked in. Where's everybody from? A lot of cold places. And I say cold because I'm in the process of moving to Florida. So I'm looking to increase my temperature zone by a good 40 degrees from down here in Delaware. I do want to know, is this your first Ama La Vida event, anybody? Christy, I know it's not your first. Sonia, well, welcome. Leilani as well. Zach, wow, we have a couple first. That's great. So as Justice said, today's session will be recorded. For anything regarding future sessions, you can check out our Ama La Vida website. What I do ask is that you be present and take notes. There will be sometimes throughout the sessions that I might ask, hey, what do you think? Or could you write down some thoughts about how you would practice this back in your companies? So I do invite you to make some jot down notes, but again, the recording will be available. And if you need any information about a consult, please contact Justice. So let's start. So why indeed are we here? So we're here because we're concerned about communication in our workplace. And indeed, effective communication is critical to an organization's success, and particularly to establishing a really strong culture. So we want to find out, what are we doing with the messaging that's coming across in our organization? So let's do a quick check. On a scale of 1 to 10, how effective do you think the communication is in your organization? 1 being low, 10 being high. Wow, middle ground, got a 2. 6s, 10. Shamika, I'm excited. We got to take lessons from your organization for sure. That is fantastic. So what I hope to do is to give everybody a chance to walk away with 7 tips to take back to their organizations to help them get to Shamika's status of a 10. And I find that, quite honestly, the tips are going to help you not only with communication from the top, but also horizontal communication or upward communication. I love that. Let's speak it into existence. You might even find that some of the tips are going to be good for your personal life as well. Even prepping for today, I was reminded how many of these I need to do in my personal life. So if anybody's in my personal life, beware, I'm going to be practicing some additional skills. The main reason that communication fails in organization is it really forgets about the audience. It really forgets to connect to the audience, to consider the employees, to consider the stakeholders. We frequently shape the communication from an I perspective. I'm the CEO and I wanted to share. I'm the chief financial officer and this is the information what I wanted to share. Sharing data is great, but if you don't give people the story and the ability to connect to that information, you're already starting off ineffectively. So let's see if we could perhaps change that a bit. We're talking about sharing information from the top. So that's really downward communication. And you can see with my little downward pyramid, we're talking about starting at the top, going down the hierarchy, the mid-level management, followed by the lower level management, and then finally the workers. Of course, information is going to spread throughout all different places in an organization, but we really are looking for that downward modality. And why would you share information this way from the top? Maybe the top would like to push out data, or they want to push out the results of how the organization's performing, financial results. Maybe they want to make assignments. Maybe they want to talk about challenges the organization is facing. If it really is done well, then you can create a very cohesive work environment for all employees because everybody's hearing the same information. You could share information via downward communication, via town halls, via posters, via TVs. I even worked at one organization that we had a logo that used to go across our desktop back when we had desktops and not laptops. You could share information downward via manuals, etc. If it's done right, you'll see increased job satisfaction, employee engagement, and even employee retention. However, doing it right, as we could see by the 5s, the 2s, the 6s, and I love Shamika's let's speak it into existence, really doesn't happen that frequently. That sort of let's take charge and create the command to take action just is forgotten about. If it's done really poorly, then you're going to have a lot of information distortion, confusion, engagement's going to be low, morale can be low. And that frequently did happen in my experience in human resources. As people shared information, they really didn't connect. Even when there was calls to action, we really kind of missed the mark. So a lot of this is lessons I would have taught myself a long time ago. So let's start with our 7 tips. 7 tips, pretty simple for me. Know your audience, identify the purpose of the message, what the heck is the bottom line of that message, and just like communicate, or location, I want to say reinforce. What is that message that you need to reinforce? And you want to seek to understand, did your audience really connect? Seek feedback, ask information from your audience about how you're performing, and then ultimately create accountability in your organization so you make this a way of rules for your organization. Let's start and go all tips one by one. Tip one, who? Let's just start with the who. So frequently in an organization, when they're talking about communication, they try to jump right into the message. I say pull back. Let's start with identifying who is the audience that you want to identify. And as a matter of fact, will this message meet a lot of different who's? There might be the who of the employer, the who of the customer. Maybe the managers need to hear a different message. Maybe different parts of an organization need to hear a different message. By stopping and identifying who are you targeting with the communication, you really start altering how you're going to shape that message. Even think of who needs to know what. What do you want the audience of those who to do with the information? What is the best way to connect to that who? All of this comes from starting with who. So tip one, forget the what. Let's start with the who. Tip two, could do tips two. But tip two, we're putting that what aside, and now we're going to add a why. Tip one, who? Tip two, why? So just out of curiosity, how many people have heard of Simon Sinek? He's a famous motivational speaker. He's all over the internet, YouTube, TED Talks. Put in the chat if you've heard of Simon. Excellent. That's good. So Simon Sinek is really famous for his work on Start With Why. It's a great video that's out there. I encourage you to check out his work on that as well as his book. Starting with why talks about really impassioning your message so it connects with your audience and really explains where you're coming from. What he has is he has created this golden circle to describe an organizational hierarchy and an organizational structure. He says that what happens frequently with organizational communication is that people start with the what. What are the products that we're dealing with? What is the services that we're dealing with? They may include the how. Hey, here's our mission. Here's our provocative motivation behind it. But he's suggesting if you start with the why, you start with the reason for your messaging, your reason you want the people to connect, the reason behind what you're saying or communicating, you're much more likely for your leaders to be successful in that communication. And I really saw that for myself when I was actually coaching leadership of a manufacturing organization. The manufacturing organization certainly focused on safety, regulations, quality, but boy, oh boy, was the production behind. No matter what they would do, no matter how much data they would push out, no matter how transparent they were trying to be, the production was behind. So we changed our communication philosophy. Instead of just pushing out the data, we really did start with why. Why is this important? Why is it important that production get on schedule? Why is it important that we make our product? Our product was actually healthcare products designed to really help the general community at large. And when we start to really think about, hey, this widget or this product is helping humanity, is helping people, it really started to change things for the organization and the people down in the trenches making the product. They even contacted a couple clinics who were using our product and put pictures of the clinics up. We actually had pictures of some patients up in the work area so that people would always connect with the why of what they were doing and why it was really important. Totally made a difference. Did we hit production? I'm going to be honest, we did not. There were still a lot of other factors at bay, but boy, oh boy, were people much more engaged and we were much closer on the way to hitting our bottom line. So we talked about tip one, who. Tip two, start with why. Tip three is let's look at the message. Very frequently in an organization, a message is ineffective because, gosh darn it, it's really long. It's 5 paragraphs of what's going on, or it's pages and pages. It's a report that's 30 some odd pages long. It's a poster that nobody's really looking at for the most part, or it's a squishy that I've pushed out to try to be catchy. The message just gets lost. So tip 3 is keep it clear, keep it concise, keep it simple. Consider the clarity of the message really isn't decided by the receiver. It's decided by, isn't decided by the sender. It's decided by the receiver. So how clear can you make it and increase the likelihood of the receiver understanding the message? Make sure your messaging is to the point. It's not long. It's not vague. A lack of clarity is a main challenge for a lot of messaging in an organization. I always think of messaging from a whisper down the lane perspective. You think you're clear to begin with, and you're clear when you you share the message with the next person, and that person thinks they're clear when they share the message, and by the end, there's all sorts of distortion. Let's try to avoid that by keeping it very concise. Think of what is the clear main points that you want to cover. I think a good way, and maybe people have heard of this, is to follow the rules of the 7 C's. And I don't mean ocean waters, but 7 C's: clear, concise, concrete, correct, coherent, complete. I modified complete to call to action, because I think that's a critical part of complete, and courteous. So clear is what is the true purpose of the message. Is the message easy to understand? Again, the simple. Keep it concise. It should be short as possible. I say same thing in emails. Do not write long emails. Keep it concrete. What are the facts? No faux information in there. Keep it correct and accurate. Make sure it's suitable for your audience. Think about, does the messaging need to change from audience to audience? Is it coherent? Is it logical? Is it easy to follow? Is it easy to understand? Is it complete? Is all the relevant information in there? Does it create a call to action? Does it connect with your audience so they want to do something with that information? That should be part of making it complete. Again, a lot of times messages from the top is a push out of information, but not a call to action. And is it courteous? What is the tone of the information? Is it respectful? Does it excite you? I think a good example for me of using the 7 C's better, or certainly the call to action, is I worked for an organization that was not performing well. And in talking to the leaders, we were realizing this chief financial officer was doing a really nice job of pushing out data. He would get up at town halls and we would see all sorts of charts, and here's why we're not hitting profit, and here's what our customers are buying. There were more Excel sheets than I knew what to do with. And they would be squished onto tiny little charts and papers. And he thought he knew what he was doing. And we realized his message, although very transparent and very detailed, was not very clear. We worked on trying to simplify his message. And then in addition, we gave the CEO a chance at the table, and the COO, came up and supplemented his message with a call to action. Hey folks, this is what it means to you. Here is that why. Here's what we want you to do with that message. And indeed, we were able to do much better as an organization. So we made his data, his information much more clear, concise, concrete, and then we made sure we paired it with that call to action and that motivating tone. Made a big difference. Tip 1, who? Tip 2, why? Tip 3 really is the message itself. Let's go to tip 4. Tip 4, this is actually one of my favorite phrases. Let's see if I can read it right. I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure that you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. Just take a moment to read that to yourselves. I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure that you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. So what this really means is, receiver thinks they were great. They got it. I understood, David, what you were trying to say. But what they don't know, is what they think they heard is really has nothing to do with what I meant to say. I don't know about you, but when you think of your own personal lives, how many times have you turned to a loved one or a friend and said, hey, that has nothing to do with what we were talking about, or nothing to do with what I said, or I'm sorry that I wasn't clear. You got to rephrase the message to really make sure you consider how it might be interpreted. I frequently hear from leaders that I coach a level of frustration. I've told that employee again and again and again. I made it crystal clear that this is what I want, but the employee wasn't following directions. I like to just pause, maybe uncomfortably so, and say, really, were you clear? How do you know you were clear? Well, I repeated it. I made sure. I said it several different times. That doesn't mean it was clear. How do you know it was clear? How do you know that your message wasn't interpreted a different way? So if we take the time to really be thoughtful in our message, really be intentional, maybe even ask questions, be curious. Do you understand what I said? What did you think of that message? Check your assumptions. Really evaluate whether your message was clear. There's two really good parts to this tip to me, and that comes in the form of two-way communication and active listening. So let's take a quick dip into those two pools before we move to tip 5. Tip 4, what I mean by two-way communication is a tennis match. When I think of tennis and I think of a really good match, I think of a volley that gets me excited, that gets me engaged. It's tennis player to tennis player with the ball going over the net back and forth and me getting very excited. That's what I'm asking you to do to increase the effectiveness of your message. Really look at inviting two-way communication. Yes, it could be messages being pushed out from the top, but they still can have that two-way dialogue with their audiences. And if they don't have it, you certainly can as your follow-up to that message to make sure it's understood. Really focus on your audience. Allow time for people to digest the information, just like the good volley. It takes time. Be open. Be open to feedback. Be open to your own foibles that you may not be communicating clearly. Use tools that are available. I don't know about you, but I'm Ama La Vida likes to use Slack as a channel and a tool to make sure that there's dialogue and two-way communication. Certainly gathering frequently asked questions, or adding a Q&A, a question and answer at the end or during the process, certainly can be all effective tools to make sure that you are checking for your understanding. It's a great additional thing. Direct messages from the top frequently are one way. You can add a two-way to that element by holding yourselves accountable to making sure that message is understood. The best way to do that is really to actively listen, really to stop, to pause and focus on the other person. Actually, it was Stephen R. Covey said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They actually listen with the intent to respond. And if you think about your own conversations and wanting to engage in your own volleys, frequently your mind might be coming up with, well, what do I want to say to that? How am I going to respond to that? Instead of just sitting back, sitting with what the person's saying and actively listening. One of the best tips with that is to really be quiet and observant. What is the person communicating with their nonverbal language? What is the person saying in their questions? What tone are they using? Are they agitated? Are you really coming from the same understanding? We actually have a course, and by we I mean Ama La Vida, has a course on YouTube on active listening that I really encourage you to review. I believe it was Coach Jennifer who recorded that webinar for us. And there will actually be a link in our webinar to push that out so that you could put this all together in one big package. Again, focus on two-way communication and active listening. to really make this tip sing. Tip 5. Whoops, don't know what that is. There we go. A little stubborn. Tip 5, reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. Are you reinforcing the message? Or are you treating your communication from the top as one and done? They just communicate the message out and that's it. I know a lot of times with messages from the top, companies may add posters or visuals, or I said we used to do a lot of giveaways, little tchotchkes for the desk in the office to try to help reinforce the message from the top. As mentioned, active listening or two-way communication is a great way to engage in reinforcement, but I actually think the best reinforcers aren't the little posters, aren't the little printouts, aren't the manuals. I think the best reinforcers of messages from the top actually are middle management. I know that might be crazy. A lot of people say, oh, middle management is that clay layer. They're the reasons that information gets distorted. They confuse a message all the time. You can't rely on middle management. And I say, wrong. Let's focus on middle management and let's get their expertise up so that they are great communicators of the information. Think about it. The middle managers are the ones in the middle. They sit in between the leaders and the employees, and frequently they're the ones that are the department heads. If we focus more on making sure that the middle management are clear, that they understand the message, then we're really going to make it more effective. For if they don't understand the message and they're confused or disengaged, that's indeed the message they're going to send. I don't get it. I don't know what they're talking about. I never understand what the leaders are saying. They never are concerned about the audience. They're really going to convey distortion, confusion, and negativity. So instead, let's make them a critical part of the message and really help them in their communication. I actually worked with one leader who was in charge of operations, and we thought we were great at messaging from the top. We were actually the top of that particular organization's division. And we would push out messaging, and then I would go along and check with the employees, and they said, I have no idea what you're talking about. I never heard that. I don't even agree with it. What's going on? My manager doesn't tell me anything. And it would just be a negative scenario. I don't know how many of you might be experiencing that in your organization. I would say some of those 2s and 5s probably are feeling that in general. We had one of our higher level middle managers came to us and said, well, why don't you just give us a script? What? Why don't you just give us a script? Some bullet points of what it is that you want to communicate so that we know exactly what is the importance of the message and how to connect. And I remember back then pushing back and saying, why do you need a script? You're a leader in this organization. You should be able to understand. Well, I hear that you want me to understand, but I don't. So why not give me a script? And that was when light bulbs went on for me as a coach for this team. Wait a minute, I'm so busy worried about the I in the message that I forgot about the audience and really making sure that they understand. So we developed these little scripts, very short, couple sentences. Anytime we wanted a message pulled out, we would then pull the managers back in after we had whatever town hall or whatever messaging pulled out, say, do you understand? How would you take this message forward? What questions do you have? So we actually spent time training the middle managers and coaching them to be better communicators. And it made such a world of difference. Plus it brought the morale up of a particular population, the middle managers that really tend not to have a high level of morale. We could actually note it in engagement surveys the next year, what a difference it made. So to me, middle level management matters. The other part of that is really the opportunity to reinforce in one-on-ones. So just in the chat, how many of you are engaged in regular one-on-ones with your employees? Thank you, Katie. I'm glad you are. Excellent. Great. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that people, okay. Sonia, that was actually vulnerable and honest, and I appreciate that. Okay, and you just started this is great. Very often I'm finding out when I'm coaching folks that organizations are all over the place with one-on-ones. I say, forget what your organization's doing, own it yourself. Make sure that you're owning your own success by having very meaningful one-on-ones. I'm a huge proponent. I think that you should do that even if you have performance appraisal systems. It makes all the difference when you're meeting with your employees. Why? Because it's your chance to review critical messaging and seeing how they're doing. I always went with a 3-step philosophy in my one-on-ones. Okay, what's working? What's not working? And what roadblocks stand in the way that I could help you out with? It was less, let me get a status report, and much more about an engaging dialogue. Love that. Ama La Vida actually has a template that we're going to push out. I'm very about, let's give some resources. That really has a 5-step element to it. I actually, when I looked at it, thought this was much better than I've ever done. One, what are those critical messages that are being pushed out, and how can I reinforce that? Check that understanding with the employee, make sure that they're on the same page that I am. 2, what are the wins that the person's experienced? Because we want to celebrate that. We want to reinforce that message. And that actually changes the morale of the workforce. I would say you could even ask, well, who helped you with that win, and give them reinforcement as well. 3, you can ask your project status updates. I know many people these days are getting away from that because they're doing project management systems or they have other tools to capture that. However, if you want to do that, I certainly gather that that's possible. 4, ask the employee to identify any roadblocks that they have. I think this is really critical. So this way, as a manager, you can help them be more successful. The benefit and the beauty of these regular one-on-ones is that you're not waiting to the end of the year's performance appraisal to be able to help somebody course correct. So if they didn't understand the critical messaging or their performance was off, then you could help them along the way. If they are experiencing a roadblock, that's horrible. Let's help with the frustration and let's be better managers ourselves. And then 5, certainly there's an opportunity to discuss development and feedback. How do they want to grow? What can you do to help them get there? What gaps do they feel that they have? What new information that they want? So really 5 elements to our template. 1, understanding the critical communications. 2, really looking at the wins. 3, any project updates, if that's what you want to do. 4, identifying roadblocks and helping them solve that. And then 5, discussing personal development and feedback. I think really when you're looking at making communication effective by implementing really some focus on your middle managers, as well as really looking at how you're communicating yourselves and how management's doing the one-on-ones, certainly can improve the situation. For those people who don't have regular one-on-ones, I did recently coach a leader who did not have regular one-on-ones, and he implemented it through his organization, at least for him and his top tier. And he immediately saw a level of engagement, initiative. He saw people much more involved with creating strategy. Eventually, he did look at trying to open it up for lower level employees. And when he did, he found out that the messages from the top, and then at the message from the top was actually not getting it down to the employees at all. So he had to go back to this own material and really look at how we were clarifying the message. So it's a good tense as well. And Leilani, actually, that's great. I did too work for an organization that got away from personal, professional evals and just implemented really good one-on-ones. It really takes a lot, especially if you're working for a global organization, because you have to factor in a lot of cultural norms. So kudos, that's a pretty robust organization for to see that happening. I know that there are a lot of performance evaluation tools that are really putting detailed one-on-ones as part of the tool itself. Tip 6, we're rounding the corner, just 2 tips left, and then we're going to open it up to question and answer. 6, feedback. So we talked about seeking understanding. We talked about active listening. Now let's look at really creating a culture of feedback. Really looking at how you can solicit feedback about how your communication is doing, what's going on. Did you understand the message that was being sent? Elon Musk, and I know he's a very polarizing type of leader, really puts a feedback loop in his organization from a culture perspective so that he can constantly push the edge. What can they do differently? What do they need to do more of? How they can learn and how they could create. Some of my best ways to put feedback when it comes to understanding that message from the top, have town halls where you're gathering people together. You can do it in virtual sessions as well, or have mini town halls where you're just breaking the workforce apart and having the communication. Department meetings, a great way to seek feedback, the one-on-ones. Some organizations like to have skip level meetings where a manager's manager might meet with lower level employees to try to get access to information on what's going on. Whatever's appropriate for your culture, I think creating that culture of feedback is really, really critical. How so? How do you really look at communicating and feedback to help your team? Well, as we've said, it really does check on the critical messages to make sure they're understood. Feedback environment really opens the communication and the culture. You focus on creating psychological safety in the environment, which is a very current term, where you're making it safe. It's a goal, make it safe and make sure that there's trust in the organization. It helps give you more insights and solutions as conversations happen, and it gives you a chance to celebrate wins. And if the messages from the top aren't clear, by having feedback about that, you could course correct before people go away negative or they disengage. It's a way to capture the people before they exit the organization. Extra little tip from David, don't just give feedback, make sure you're actually soliciting feedback. The best way to establish credibility, especially if you're newer management, is to solicit feedback. So don't just ask, was the message clear? How did I do with my conveying the message? Was I clear? Do you have any questions about my belief in the message? Remember, be willing to share your why. It makes a really big difference in whether you're successful with your team. I worked with this one leader, really nice man, great. I really enjoyed working with him, and we were talking about feedback. And he said, David, I don't do any one-on-ones, and really, I haven't solicited feedback at all. So we talked about him soliciting feedback in the organization. And one of the things he found from his top tier is they liked him. They thought he was a nice guy, but they were really frustrated because they felt that he didn't trust them and that he was a micromanager. He wouldn't trust them when communicating messages from the top. He would tell them, then he would tell their next tier, then he would tell the employees below them. And they really felt that there was a different way to act. So we talked about leadership. We talked about his leadership style. We instilled that feedback culture, and it made a big difference within actually 2 months. In his case, it was a smaller organization. It was an 80-person organization. By instilling that feedback from the top, really looking at how messages should be communicating, building that feedback culture, he saw a big difference, and his organization was incredibly successful. They actually, so much so, they started to acquire other organizations. So I was always excited for him. Tip 7, so our last tip for today is to build in accountability. And by that, I mean making sure that you're not just talking about it, that you're walking the walk, talking the talk. If you are going to truly affect making the communication from the top and making sure that people hear it and understand it, what are you going to do to build in accountability to make sure those messages are clear, concise, focused on why, that you're seeking understanding, that you're using active listening, two-way communication, that you're fostering that feedback culture. If you are going to rely on middle management more heavily, like I suggest, what are you doing to make sure that those middle management are trained to give feedback, to solicit information, making sure that they understand the communication? They're such a vital part of your organization. Build in that level of accountability so you're really bringing it home for folks. So today we talked about 7 tips. Know your audience, identify the purpose of the message, simplifying that message so the bottom line is crystal clear, reinforce, reinforce, reinforce. We talked about many different ways to reinforce the message. Some of the folks were talking about how they use one-on-ones and how they could use one-on-ones more regularly. So I kind of went on a side about the importance of one-on-ones. We talked about active listening. We talked about two-way communication and seeking to understand. Talked about seeking feedback and establishing a feedback culture. And lastly, holding ourselves accountable for creating accountability to do all these 7 tips. So before I open the doors to question and answer, I guess I want to hear from folks. So when you think about the 7 tips, what is one thing that you're going to do either more of or differently when you go back to your organizations? You can actually just type it in the chat. Number 6, feedback culture. I think that's really important. Middle management. Regular check-in with middle management. This is great. This is great. Well, if there's anything that we could do to help you out, that Ama La Vida could do to help you out, coach your middle managers, or maybe work with your organizations, that's what we're here for. We'd be glad to do that. So just reach out. Let us know. You can certainly connect with me via Ama La Vida or LinkedIn, and I'll be glad to share whatever information I can. We'd love to have you as partners. And Justice, I guess I'll turn it over to you. Is there any additions that you want to share?
Thank you so much for all everything you brought to us today. I know you're currently taking on a few new clients. If you don't mind, for everyone here, just telling how you support your clients in some other ways in your coaching sessions. Can you touch on those for a little bit?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Thanks for asking, Justice. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I love working with people who are trying to improve their leadership skill sets. I'm a big fan of emotional intelligence in the workplace, as everybody at Ama La Vida knows. I talk about it all the time. And I really do think that if we spend time understanding ourselves and what we're bringing to the table and really focus on our audience and understanding what they're bringing to the table and putting it all together, we could be so incredibly much more impactful. So that's the type of work I like to do. And whether that's as part of a career growth or growing a business, I think it embeds itself in a lot of different topics. I'd be glad to help you out.
Thank you so much, David. So yes, I'm dropping my consult link one more time. I'm also going to drop the link to our website. We do have some other leadership coaches on there as well. And so if you ever want to explore anything, we'd love to all have a conversation with you. But with that being said, we can now open up the floor to question and answer. You can feel free to type them in, or if you're comfortable, you can come off of mute and ask David directly. But the floor is yours to anyone who has a question right now.
Hey, David, this is Libby. I have a question for you.
Hi, Libby.
Hi. What do you think? I've heard so many times organizations, and I know I've experienced this, where there's messages from the very, very top, and then the direct reports, the individual contributors, all the way at kind of the bottom of the food chain, as it were. And there always seems to be some sort of gap in the communication down as well as the communication back up. What do you think about that?
So I love that you talked about upward communication. Huge proponent of focusing on upward communication. So very insightful, Libby. So thank you for throwing that in there. I think the gap really does come from organizations not practicing these 7 tips, quite honestly, that they're not really focused on. Frequently, the top manager pushes it out and says, check, I did my communication, but they forget that there's a whole plethora of audience members that need to deal with that information. So if we focus more on clearing out that clay of the clay layer and really making sure that there is that true downward communication and checking in with it to make sure it's clear, I think it goes a long way. And let's stay with your upward communication, soliciting that feedback from the employees and giving them the opportunity to give feedback upward to the manager. So it's not just downward, that it really changes our understanding of our audience. I actually worked with an organization and we had, you know how you've heard of 360 feedback or you've heard about other feedback tools. We actually implemented an upward feedback tool where teams would actually meet with their managers and say, hey, here's what we would like you to do to make our jobs better and more interesting and more value add as a group. So it was actually fascinating to work with leaders in that organization. Did I address your question, Libby?
You did. That was great. Thank you.
Thanks, Libby.
We have one in the chat.
The coaching template will be pushed out as part of the one-on-one template will be pushed out when the course is pushed out.
Yes, the recording and everything should go out tomorrow. Are there any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, I guess we can give you a little bit of time back on your Thursday. Once again, thank you so much for everyone for coming and spending some time with us and Coach David. If you have any interest in future events and or seeing some past events that we have, I'm going to drop the link to both our YouTube and Eventbrite pages for anyone who would find value in that. But other than that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and enjoys your weekend. And we will talk soon.
Thanks everyone.